Hey guys, this is Mark. Welcome back. In this video, I will talk about the HTTP request block, which is very versatile action that is available in FlowRunner that allows you to work with an external resource and execute any kind of HTTP request. You could be fetching data, you could be submitting data, executing a delete operation to delete a resource somewhere on the web. The need for working with external resources happens pretty much. Most automations, you'll be working with some external resources. And in cases when you do not have a built-in extension that works with an external resource, and you need to execute some kind of API operation, or just fetch, let's say, CSV file or something that where you need to bring data into your automation, HTTP request can do it quite easily. And you can configure it to pass any data from your flow into an external system for further processing, or configure your request to fetch data. So I will demonstrate a couple of scenarios that show and that will illustrate how it works, and you'll see how simple it is and how many different things you can actually do with the HTTP request. Any data you pass into the block, you can construct it early on in your flow or somewhere in your flow in the predecessors. And whatever HTTP request fetches, that data also becomes accessible for any successors of the HTTP block. So just like with everything else in FlowRunner. So with this, let's dig in and just play with it and see how it works. So you will find the HTTP request block under Actions. You can see it right here. Drag it out and let's select it to see what the configuration parameters are of this block. And by the way, you can just rename it to give it some specific name that really reflects what this block is fetching or what it is doing. Now, the very first thing is going to be the URL. That's the URL where the request is going to be sent to, where you're fetching data from or you're submitting a request to. And whether you're fetching or submitting really depends on the selected HTTP method. So there are 6 built-in methods, as you can see right here. The ones that are most common are going to be get, post, put, and delete. Okay, so whatever operation that you are constructing, there may be some documentation that describes what specific method, HTTP method you need to use. The general rule of thumb is that if you are getting data from somewhere, when you're bringing data into your system, it's going to be get request. For others, for updates or creating something new, it's going to be either put or post, depending how the author of that external resource, that external operation, they constructed it. If you're deleting something somewhere, it's going to be the delete operation. So those are the most common ones. Now, some additional things that you can configure are body, query, and headers. So body is what goes into the actual request. Typically, body is going to be present if you're doing post, put, delete, and then other ones like patch and so on. If you're doing get, the body generally is not there, so you should not worry about it. If body is there for, let's say, post and put operations, you can configure it as an object, and we will get to this. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. And the constructed object using transform data, and we will also talk about it as our training course continues. But just getting ahead of myself, this transform data will allow you to construct those objects. So in terms of query, that's going to be a query string, and I will demonstrate it today how it works. Headers are some additional elements that go into HTTP request, and they are structured in the format of key values. So every header has its name. That's really the key. And then there is a corresponding value that is attached to that header. And you could have multiple headers. So here, see it, name, value, and if you need to add additional ones, click this plus, and that's going to be an additional pair of headers. Now, to demonstrate how this works, let's do a couple of things. Number one is I found an API that is called Weather API. So here, for this API, it is under weatherapi.com. You can register and create your account. You're going to get your API key, and Using this API, you can fetch information about the weather. Whether you will need it for your automations or not, I'm not sure, maybe. But it's a simple API that will demonstrate how working with an external resources and external APIs would work in FlowRunner. So with this, let's do this. First of all, in their documentation, this is their documentation that describes all kinds of things that you can do. This is going to be the base URL. So we will select this guy and do copy. And back in FlowRunner, in the URL, I'm going to paste this URL. Okay. Then the next thing is you can see the current weather. It's going to be a /current.json. So we will append that current.json. Okay, so that's the actual base URL of where the request is going to be sent to. After this, as you will see, the key is going to be our API key, and Q it will be like the name of the city for which we're fetching weather for. Okay, and that is going to be a GET request. It is documented somewhere here. I cannot really see where, but it is a GET request. So what we are going to do is, let me copy my API key. This is my API key. And let's configure this guy as a GET request. So for query, there are two parameters that I need to specify. One of them is key. So it will say key equals, and I'm pasting my API key. And the next one will be Q. Q is the query. Now the multiple parameters in the query string are going to be delimited with the ampersand character. So if I put ampersand, it means that I'm starting a new parameter that will be specified. So here Q equals Dallas. So now everything is configured for my query. How do I test? How do I run this without starting the actual flow? And for this, there is a feature that I will demonstrate that will have its own a video in our training course about testing things in FlowRunner. And that feature is called test mode. Notice there is a toggle right here. And when I click on it, the entire interface, well, most of it changes to something different, where now we have this block result inspector, and then we got this test panel, and there's this light orange background panel. Let's just accept things as they are, and I will explain in greater detail what things are and how test mode works. But for now, click test mode, and then all the data that you entered before you click test mode is going to show up right here as well. So now you can click this icon right here, run in test mode. And what this does is it actually executes this HTTP request. It goes out to weatherapi.com. Weather API fetches data, in this case for Dallas, and returns the result. Now this result is going to be displayed right here. So you will see exactly what that API returned, and all of this data now will become available in the flow. So any additional blocks that I will add, they can access this information. Okay, so and it is great. So one thing that I wanted to do is we don't want to hard code our API key. We want to hard code Dallas. So now that you know how variables work, let's rework this flow and introduce variables where we can configure the API key and the city for which we're fetching the data. So for this, I'm going to turn off test mode, and we will go and use our set variables block. So now that we have set variables, and we want set variables to run first, but notice that the start is connected to HTTP request. So how do we inject set variables into here to be before? And for this, you can just click whenever you hover the start element, you can click on it, and it gives you an ability to designate which one is going to be the starting one. So we want set variables to be. So click here. So now set variables is the first one that will start. So now we can connect these two together. Okay, so set variables will run first, and then HTTP request. From HTTP request, let's get my API key, copy it, and then in the set variables, I will create a variable that is called, let's call it weather API key, and the value is going to be what I paste. And then the query variable will contain city of Dallas. Okay, so now there are two variables that are being configured in the default data bucket. And this guy needs to be modified to take values from the variables. And for this, let's open up expression editor. We can actually drop this thing completely. So see, I just moved it outside of the expression and that dropped it entirely. So now if we double click text input, and in here, we'll say key equals, and then key is going to be equal our weather API key. So we can just drag it. And the next thing is we want to add text input again. And remember that we need to add this ampersand q equals, and then pass in query. So this will dynamically construct exactly the same query that we previously had as hard-coded. So now click apply. So now if we turn on test mode, remember that you need to execute set variables first. So see, these variables have been configured. And now we click on this, and then HTTP request fetches data using variables. Now keep in mind, and that's something that I just overlooked, is that in the test mode, it's a copy of the data that was there before. So what we want to do is, let's do show non-test. This is the non-test data. And we can say apply to test data. So now the test data is going to be exactly the same as the non-test data. As you can see right here. See, orange is always test data. So let's rerun it. And there you go. It fetched all the information using our dynamic query. And that's basically how HTTP request works. You can fetch anything you want, as long as there is a URL. You can submit data for further processing if you need to. One other example that I have is here on nasa.gov. There is an RSS feeds of all kinds of stuff. So let's just fetch data of image of the day. So click on this, okay, and it opened up this thing. So somehow it's not rendering, but I'm gonna take this URL, okay, and I will put it right into my FlowRunner flow, okay. In fact, let's add another HTTP request and turn off test mode, and that's going to call it NASA RSS, and then the URL is going to be this. Let's just see if that works. So I'm going to turn on test mode and execute NASA RSS, and there you go. It returned XML. So XML, that's the standard RSS format, which is not very convenient from the programming perspective, because sort of JSON is really the format that everyone is accustomed to, and it's really a lot easier to work with. So, but this is just an example of fetching data from a URL, as you can see. Now this responded to post, and I guess RSS, if we change it to get, it's going to be exactly the same. So click get, yes, it returned the same thing. So that's the demonstration. HTTP request is very powerful. It can connect to pretty much anything and pass any kind of data, because with FlowRunner you can structure any kind of format, the request in any kind of format. So I believe that you will find it quite useful in a lot of different scenarios. But that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to talk about in this video. If you have any questions, please let us know. And until next video, happy automations.